Meta faces the FTC as blockbuster antitrust trial kicks off. And this will probably be the biggest, most significant trial of the company's entire history. And the results of this trial will most likely have very far-reaching implications to basically every tech company. Think of Amazon, Google, Oracle, and so on. All of these will be impacted by the precedent set from this trial because it will decide whether or not the FTC is allowed to come after these companies for these kinds of antitrust laws. And here are the details of the lawsuit. Meta will face off against the US Federal Trade Commission on Monday in a high-stakes antitrust trial, and this is the important part, that could result in the company divesting Instagram and WhatsApp. So right off the bat, the stakes almost couldn't be higher. Instagram and WhatsApp are two absolutely huge services, and they're both basically household names. For Facebook to have to divest both of them, that's probably close to a third, maybe up to almost 40%, 45% of the entire company's valuation, just because of how large and significant those apps are, especially WhatsApp internationally. It's kind of the gold standard of messaging communication. In fact, if you want to know just how significant that would be, what are the top social media platforms in the world? And over here, we can see in 2024, Facebook is still the top social media platform with 3.1 billion monthly active users, making it the only one to surpass 3 billion users. So Facebook is absolutely huge. And then, not surprisingly, YouTube comes in second place with 2.5 billion active users, which is still 600 million less than Facebook. But then we see third place is Instagram and WhatsApp. Both have 2 billion monthly active users each, tying for third place. So you can see why it would be so devastating for Facebook to be forced to divest these two, because collectively they actually make up more users than Facebook by itself. Meta, the company, owns the first and then the two tied place for third social media platforms. That's why it's so big and one of the most valuable companies in the entire world. So you can imagine that they're not super keen on being forced to sell off these two platforms. The company as it stands now probably would not survive this, or at least not at the capacity that we think of Meta today as the behemoth of social media that it is. Moving on with the lawsuit though, the trial in Washington is expected to last weeks and centers around the FTC's allegation that Meta monopolizes the personal social media networking market. CEO Mark Zuckerberg, formerly COO Sheryl Sandberg, Instagram co-founder Kevin Systrom, and other current and former Meta executives are expected to testify, along with top brass from rivals TikTok, Snap, and Google's YouTube, according to a legal filing. The FTC claims Meta shouldn't have been allowed to buy Instagram for $1 billion in 2012, which is absolutely a steal considering what it's worth now, and WhatsApp for $19 billion in 2014, and the agency is calling for those units to be sliced off from the Menlo Park, California company. So basically, the FTC is arguing that 11 or 13 years ago, depending on which acquisition you're looking at, it was a mistake to let the then still growing but still massive company Facebook start buying up these smaller growing social media platforms like Instagram and WhatsApp. Their argument is that by doing that, it gave Meta too much power. Meta owns too much of the social media network, and as a result of that, they're able to choke out competition illegally. And if you think about it on the surface, this actually kind of seems like a reasonable argument. One behemoth mega company owning 3 out of the top 4 social medias is a pretty big deal. All of that information and data being concentrated into one company that can kind of do whatever they want because of their size, you can understand why lawmakers and regulators would be very cautious to let this go on. And while you can probably guess why this is an issue, there are two main facets to why this is a problem: advertising and information suppression. And for information suppression, it happens like this. Mark Zuckerberg tells Rogan FBI warning prompted Biden laptop story censorship. And that title is a bit confusing and poorly worded, but you probably have heard the story. The New York Post alleged leaked emails from Hunter Biden's laptop showed the then vice president was helping his son's business dealings in Ukraine. Facebook and Twitter restricted the sharing of the article before reversing course amid an allegation of censorship. Zuckerberg said that getting the decision wrong absolutely sucks. And here I'm not arguing whether or not Biden's laptop story was a hoax or not a hoax, or overblown or covered up by the media and FBI, so on and so forth. That is not the point of this. The point is that one person, Mark Zuckerberg, was able to make one huge unilateral suppression call about something that he decided he wanted to suppress. One man was able to make a call to suppress information from 7.1 billion active monthly users just because he can. One guy, Mark Zuckerberg, has that kind of power. And that is a bipartisan disaster waiting to happen, because what if Mark Zuckerberg decided that Trump is actually pretty anti-tech and he wants a Democratic president next time? And so he starts either surfacing bad stories about Trump more on Facebook, giving them an artificially large push, or he starts hiding or censoring bad articles about Democrats, making the Democrats appear better than they are because there are no negative articles that are able to come out about them. Or vice versa. What if he decides he wants another Republican president to do something like get rid of this FTC lawsuit? Then all he has to do is suppress bad articles about this candidate, much like he has done here, and then we're kind of off to the races. One guy can kind of do whatever he wants. With the size that Facebook is, he simply has too much power to either elevate or suppress information at his own whim. And we've seen this happen at least once. And this is the only public time. There have doubtless been other stories that Mark Zuckerberg has wanted or not wanted to get out, and he has pulled them back or pushed them out accordingly. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. Having one person with that much power around news and information is a terrible idea. Now, the second point is advertising. Now, if you want to advertise on social media, your options are pretty much Meta or, Instagram, WhatsApp, TikTok, and then maybe Reddit. But that's pretty much it. And as a result of that, there's not a whole lot of competition. And Reddit kind of almost isn't on that list because they're so small compared to Facebook. So that means that Facebook can kind of raise their prices to whatever they want. And if you as an advertiser want to appear on the website in front of the 3.1 billion people they have, then you just kind of have to suck it up and pay the new prices. Imagine if Kroger were to raise their prices. Well, then you probably have an option to go to Walmart. But if I'm an advertiser and I'm selling a product that I advertise on Meta for, then if Meta raises their prices, I don't have another option. I can't go somewhere else. I could switch over to Reddit maybe, but there's not the kind of volume that I found on Meta available on Reddit. There's not 3.1 billion people that I can reach in an instant. So I kind of have to pay those new and higher prices. And if advertising prices go up, then advertisers have to charge more money in order to cover that increase in spend. And if they need to cover that increase in spend, that means you, the consumer, are on the hook for it, because now you have to pay more for the same thing, all because Meta decided they wanted to change their prices. Now, those are the big issues with it, but let's go back to what the lawsuit alleges. Acquiring these competitive threats has enabled Facebook, this is a filing by the FTC, to sustain its dominance to the detriment of competition and users, not by competing on the merits, but by avoiding competition, the FTC said in the legal filing. They're basically saying that Meta doesn't actually have to compete and make a better product. They're just so big and so dominant that they can either, one, kind of do nothing because nobody's really joining new social media platforms, or two, if something's up and coming, they can just buy them out and merge them into Facebook somehow. They have so much money and so much power that kind of nothing can challenge them at this point. If you are a company and you have enough money, you kind of don't have to compete anymore. You have so much money that you're able to either starve out competitors or buy out competitors. And before we go any farther, if you like this kind of deep dive into the news, I try to post once or twice a week, and I'd love a subscription. So at a high level, what the FTC is alleging is that Facebook was able to buy out other growing social media platforms a decade ago when they really shouldn't have been able to buy them out. And as a result of those buyouts, they have formed a dominant monopoly that chokes out competition illegally. The solution to this, according to the FTC's filings, is being forced to divest those buyouts that they should not have been able to make in the first place, in the form of Instagram and WhatsApp, with the idea being that Meta then has to make Facebook better so that they can compete with these other social medias and not just own them. Now, Meta, for their part, of course, disagrees with this, and they said as much. Meta disagrees and filed a pre-trial brief last week, reiterating its arguments that it is not a monopoly, and that acquiring Instagram and WhatsApp has not harmed competition. And the core of Meta's argument is in this legal pre-trial filing that they made here. In this case, the evidence of substitution to and from apps like TikTok, YouTube, messaging apps, and others is determinative. Claims that these services are different in some respect from Meta's apps prove only that these close competitors innovate in features and function to lure user minutes from each other. Indeed, Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat are all differentiated, yet within the FTC's alleged relevant market. So Meta is basically arguing that Facebook and Instagram are substitutes for apps like TikTok and Snapchat, meaning you could scroll either Facebook and Instagram, or you could just as easily, and for kind of the same amount of dopamine hit, scroll Snapchat or scroll TikTok. Basically, if one was taken away and the other was handed to you, they would would be more or less comparable. You would be just as happy with one as you would be with the other. Think about like Kroger and Walmart. Let's say Kroger vanishes overnight. Sure, maybe it sucks because you liked Kroger a little better, but realistically, you could substitute it for a Walmart pretty easily, or substitute it for a Target pretty easily, or an Aldi pretty easily, because they are substitutions. They're more or less equivalent to each other. And if you want a counterexample, think something like email and text, that they're conceptually similar. You send text-based things to each other as a form of communication, but if email were to vanish, people would not be switching over to text en masse, nor if text vanished would people be swapping over to email to communicate with each other. They're not substitutes for each other, because even though they're similar, they serve completely different purposes. The article then continues. The trial will test the boundaries of the US's antitrust laws pertaining to corporate acquisitions, said, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that name, a law professor at UC Berkeley Law. The FTC will have to prove that not only did Meta monopolize the social media market, but that its acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp, quote, actively harmed competition. It's a big case because it involves Meta, a social media giant, and it involves one of the most important kinds of markets in the world, so the social media market, Krishnamurthy said, and it has big implications for something that consumers use as part of their daily lives, Instagram and WhatsApp. And honestly, this might just be the biggest social media case in at least my recent memory, because if it succeeds, then it sets a precedent that the FTC can break up social medias, and by association, it can probably break up other large tech companies. But this is going to be a very difficult case because the burden of proof is on the FTC, and they have to prove two very difficult to prove things. One, that Facebook has a monopoly, but in addition to having a monopoly, they have to prove that that monopoly actively harmed competition. Monopolies in and of themselves are actually not illegal. Think about like your local power company. You can't like switch to another power company. That monopoly is not illegal. It's the intentional harming of competition that is actually illegal. And I cannot overemphasize enough how difficult it is to prove those two things. One, that you have a monopoly, and two, that you're using that monopoly to actively harm competition. And it should be difficult to do that. Companies shouldn't just be broken up willy-nilly without good cause and lots of due diligence, because that would just harm too many people. We need large, non-monopolistic companies because economies of scale are really good for reducing consumer prices. So with the trial starting soon, the questions that come to mind are, what can we expect and how soon will that happen? And the answer is, frankly, I have no idea. And that is for one very specific reason that I'd like to draw your eyes to here. This is the original FTC announcement of their lawsuit. FTC sues Facebook for illegal monopolization. The agency challenges Facebook's multi-year course of unlawful conduct. And you can see the date here is September 9th, 2020. This took 4.5 years just to get to trial. We haven't even really gotten to the meat and potatoes of a court suit, which is, the actual being in the courtroom explaining to a judge your arguments, whether for or against a company. The discussion about this has literally just started. This will probably, but I think taking years to resolve is probably the right call here, because the implications of this are absolutely massive. If the FTC wins, that means there's a precedent set that it's able to just go after big tech companies for monopolies. And if Facebook wins, that means those big tech companies with monopolies are far safer than we had previously thought. But imagine they win. Well, maybe they go after Google next for their search advertising monopoly, which they're actually already doing. And I think maybe as of like yesterday or the day before was actually found to be illegal. Or maybe they go after Amazon next for their web services. All the other tech companies are going to be watching this super closely, because if Meta loses, the FTC is definitely coming for them next. Thanks for watching.